Good morning. We'll get started with Intacct and maximizing financial reporting. So today's presentation is, you probably can cover stuff that we're typically not looking at in Intacct or using in Intacct, but we do have some examples to go through. So today's agenda, we're going to do a little overview about statistical reporting in Intacct, the steps that we would take to devise a plan to use something like this. We're going to look at dimensions, custom fields, and statistical accounts. So when we talk about enhancing our financial reporting using Intacct, one of the things we have to understand is the reporting and oversight processes we are subject to. Some of the grants that we receive might have goals that we've created for ourselves, or reporting statistics that the funding agency would require. So those would vary by the type of funds that finance a program, and also how much insight we're looking to have in decision making about how we deploy the financial resources of the tribe. Upkeep of the data is the most challenging aspect of any reporting. Whether you're keeping an Excel spreadsheet at your desk and hoping your computer doesn't die today and you can't access your spreadsheet, any type of thing is challenging. Financial reporting in Intacct's automated for us, right? We do a purchasing transaction, that expense is going to show on our financial report. We get that sense of reliability from this type of reporting. The non-financial reporting we can do requires us to take a plan, put it into action, and then keep up with doing it as time goes on or employees change. So when we talk about devising a plan to build or enhance our reporting, really there's about 4 steps to the plan. Which, number 1, we need to identify the data that we need visible. We already know the financial data is available in Intacct. We can quantify it that way. But there might be data that's driven by the grant or award requirements, special project data, things that the director want to see tracked. Whatever it is, we need to identify what it is we want to track. At that point, we can format a plan on how we're going to track that or make it visible in Intacct, which is basically building the infrastructure to help achieve those data reporting goals. How are we going to track it in Intacct? What type of reporting are we looking to do? What's the frequency of reporting? Who's our audience? Things like that will determine in the planning process. Once we know that, we can then execute the plan. Who's the team that's going to be responsible for doing all of this? Whether it's inputting data into Intacct, accessing the reports, monitoring those reports, responsible for upkeep or training, all of that will be involved in the execution plan. And then we can start to monitor it as we've put it into place. What's the project look like? What's the progress of that? Are we meeting the goals we've set for our project? Are we taking action based on the data we want to track? What's the point of tracking the data? And then using that to make better decisions for the program. So the first part we'll give an overview for is dimensions. This definition comes directly from Intacct, but a dimension is a classification system that you use to organize, sort, and report on your program in meaningful ways. We can think of a dimension as a reportable tag, which we can associate with transactions and general ledger entries. Every transaction we enter in Intacct has the option to include multiple dimensions for uniquely identifying and reporting on information. The whole purpose of dimensions in Intacct is to customize financial reports around business activities to capture key metrics and make them more visible. So what are dimensions? Here's a list of them. Most commonly used ones, the ones we use every single day for using purchasing: checkbook, program, funding source, vendor, item, and employee. And then we have a couple lesser known ones, customer and class, but class we've become a little more familiar with this year since it's required on about 80 different general ledger accounts. So these are the dimensions we can use to track our data. We can use it to report in Intacct. So we can use them in transactions. It's selectable at purchasing, order entry, and accounts receivable transactions. The responsibility of the individual user to select that dimension. Reports can be accessed where the dimension is used to help meet the needs of the organization. And then using dimensions allows us for instant tracking, instant reporting. Use our general ledger reports to filter based on dimensions so we can see certain types of outcomes. And we can even build our reports based on dimensions. We have a couple of those already built. The fiscal year encumbrance by vendors is a vendor-based report. A vendor is a dimension. Life-to-date reports is also a dimension-based. It's built on showing funding sources and account groups. So we use them every day, but we can deploy them in different ways. Whoops. Scan too far ahead. So when we look at like item ID as one of our dimensions, we don't realize the different aspects of it, but if we look at travel as one aspect of it, in Intacct, when we do a travel request, we have 20 different item IDs we can select for travel. On our financial report, we have it show just as one, but if we needed to show how much we're spending actually on each of these subcategories, there's a reason why we've created these. And so we can see all the different numbers we have: motel, baggage, mileage, and so on. But if we needed to report on this, we could create a report like a dimension balance report. So if we wanted to know a breakdown of those items by the current month, so July, we want to use the travel and training account. We're going to use all programs for one dimension, all checkbooks for another dimension, and here's that header that tells us we're using dimensions. And how do we want to display this report? We can scroll till we find the item ID. So if that's the only thing we want to see in this report, that'll be the only thing we select. And when we view this, rather than seeing the travel costs as a lump sum, now we see the actual breakdown of what's costing the tribe more, or your program if you run this by program. And we can see motel is the biggest cost of our travel, mileage is the next biggest cost, and then we have registration and per diems as other large costs. And so by using item ID as one of our dimensions, it gives us some flexibility in how we report, but it also doesn't mean we had to create 20 different account numbers so that our financial reports are blown up and 2 pages long in order to see this information. And so we have an example here of someone that's using community services is using items now. And so we executed the plan kind of like this. We identified the data that needed visibility. They wanted to expand reporting on medical travel assistance with the account number 77200 and then 77250. The first one is what they use for medical assistance for dental, vision, medical type appointments. And then the next one they use for long-term services. And then we added some ability to, they wanted to track some additional data for burial assistance. So when we started to look at a plan and doing this a couple of years ago, we identified the information that needed to be tracked. How are we going to track this? And we started by creating different item IDs for them and creating some different class structures. So when we go to Intacct, and I go back to where I can see the item IDs for us, we started with the client family services. So for their appointments, typically they're providing assistance for you to go somewhere else outside of the community to receive a doctor's appointment, that type of deal. So we created item IDs for different communities where they send members of the tribe for dental appointments or vision or medical. So when they go to create a request to pay a customer or to pay a vendor, they can identify within the request where the person is going. And in the class field, we created dental, medical, and vision. So most of us use it now to just identify whether or not it's COVID-related spending or it's just our regular program spending. We have one out there for ARPA, so as you start to deploy ARPA funds, you can begin to flag your purchases for ARPA. But with the community services program, they can then identify it as medical, finish the information of whatever the type of assistance or the value that someone is receiving, and then they can submit the request. And what this kicks in is the ability to start tracking by item ID how much they spend providing assistance to their clients. And so, like the report we looked at for travel, they can build a report like a dimension balance report by item ID. And we can see for the month of July, they've only used the Rapid City item ID for any types of assistance using the general fund. And so if we look at that a little further, let's say from May through now, we start to see what's probably being more commonly used during the period of time. And we can use that to make decisions about how the money is spent. What types of appointments are we sending people to? As it turns out, we can add that class as a type of report. So now we have item ID in class. And we can see Rapid City was for medical, Sioux Falls medical, out-of-state medical, Pure medical. So everything was medical related over the last 3 months that they've selected for. But this gives us an idea of some of the enhancements that they can make to their spending rather than just knowing how much you've spent on assistance. They've identified who's responsible for this stuff, and that's their employees that enter the request in Intacct. They go there and select that item ID and select that class. And to help with making sure the information gets used for their account number, we added a requirement that class has to be used. So the employees have no choice but to use that. So they have to say whether or not it's medical, vision, dental, that type of thing. And so this limits the effort for tracking. There's no other additional work needed from somebody outside of that first request. We've created methods to track the data. We set the rules through requiring class be used with the IDs. And then ultimately what we did is we created a dashboard for them to use. So when they go to their social services dashboard, they can start to see a breakdown of their costs and the different areas that they've sent people to for assistance, whether that's client family services for appointments or for long-term care, including their grants. So they've made more visible all this information without having to speculate in a meeting. This is always accessible in Intacct. So if you've left your worksheet on your desktop, your Excel spreadsheet, and you've left the building, you don't have to worry about that. This is available through here. And then ultimately, are we using the data to help make our decisions about how the program runs, about the type of funds we would be using. Are we going to ask for more funds at some other point? If we're going to press IHS on the types of services that we need, and we start understanding the type of medical appointments we're sending more people to, can we reduce the tribe's cost out of the general fund by pushing IHS to offer more services for the stuff we send people out for? Another aspect of reporting besides dimensions is custom fields. So travel is a good one that we use. We created custom fields in travel. It offers a way for us to capture data that's unique to the program or a workflow or a situation. And so when we go to our travel request, we created this trip description area, travel start time, start date, end date and time, and the city, state, and destination are all custom to the travel request. This allows us to capture more information during a request. Where is somebody going? When were they supposed to leave? When were they supposed to return? And we can use that to report on all the stuff we're collecting here. So the thing about the custom fields, though, it's not selectable in a report. If I'm going to run the same dimension balance report, there isn't a place for me to select travel start time or destination for the travel, that kind of stuff. That's not selectable, just dimensions are. So when we use these dimensions, we have to actually build custom reports to accommodate that request. And so samples of these reports is like when Lisa or Armida are verifying people's end dates. How long has it been since the travel ended and the person hasn't reconciled the trip? So that's a trigger for them to know they need to reach out to the program with a reminder that the person that traveled from the program hasn't reconciled the trip yet. We use a similar type of custom report so that the tribal president receives a report on all director-related travel or council-related travel. So we can add custom fields to just basically any page or even a dimension in Intacct. It offers a way to capture data that's unique. We can create checkboxes, dates, emails, pick lists, a list of however long you want that we can select data from so that people have to select the same amount of stuff. We can sequence. So if we have a unique type of ID we want to put on every one of our requests, we can do that. We have the document ID that already numbers a purchase order. But if we were using an application process or something else and we want every request that we create to include that certain sequence, we can add that to your documents. We allow text or text areas. So obviously in these requests, like the trip descriptions, we can type anything we want. City and state, we can type anything we want here. But in these fields, we're limited to selecting the actual dates or the start times on a request. So whatever it is that we're trying to track here, we can pick the thing that fits our stuff the best. What makes the most sense for what we're trying to do. Another good example of custom fields is in our funding sources. We've added a bunch of different custom fields. We track who the program monitor is. And so whoever's assigned the funding source, their name's put here, and we have a list of people that we can pick from to assign the funding source. And when that's done, it's easy. We can run a report, how many funding sources has been assigned to Sierra. We can also build groups based on the funding source of only the funding sources assigned to Sierra. So if she wanted to run a report on just the stuff assigned to her, she could. I use this because I have a special rule that says when a funding source is created, whoever is selected here gets an email sent to them. So they now know, okay, this funding source is created, here's the number, here's the program, here's the checkbook, all of that information they would expect to see. We track the type of budget, so this is a custom area that we can select from. So then when we create budgeting reports for Lynette and for Myrna, for budget and finance, we can segment those by we only want to see budgets for casino or federal, state, and other. Like for federal, state, and other, for example, this is dozens of different checkbooks, dozens of different programs. That's going to be hard to run a report individually. I can create a custom report using this to only have that type of budgets come back in a report. So the custom fields are stuff we can just use anywhere, we can use to report on through our dimensions. We also have the current and prior year as a custom field on documents. If you're requesting a payment, we have the fiscal year end column. You can pick current or prior. It doesn't affect the dates, it doesn't make a date change. But what this does is it lets us go to, if we look at voucher here. So I created a custom workflow for any document that was dated in FY21, but the fiscal year end said prior. Looking at this, on a purchasing list view, we can use a custom field, fiscal year end from the purchasing request. And this would tell me that this document, if posted, would likely create some sort of reporting issue since we're saying it's from a prior year, but then dating it for the current fiscal year. And the third component we can do is we have dimensions, we have custom fields, is we have something called statistical accounts. And TELP is the only program that's currently using statistical accounts as some form of enhanced reporting. So we can use them to track any type of non-financial data. Do we want to track the number of employees in our program? We can do that. Customers, clients, number of jail cells, locations. If we're Head Start and we wanted to track data concerning each of our Head Start facilities, we could do that. If we're MAP 21 and we wanted to track other aspects of our projects that we have, we could create that type of special account to track different information. And this is simple. It just uses a count where we increase or decrease the count. And I'll show you in a second what we do with TELP. So statistical accounts are completely customizable in how they're named. We call it anything we want. And unlike dimensions, a statistical account isn't something that gets tracked with purchasing. So we can't add it to a purchasing request. This is something that we update by journal entry. We can keep the information on a spreadsheet and then use that spreadsheet to import our data into Intacct. So if you're already tracking something, we can just take the next step and move that into Intacct. It's non-financial, so that we can enter this data anytime. It doesn't have to be just starting now going forward. If we had 2 years worth of information we want to put into Intacct, we can do that. So for the TELP program, we identified data that we wanted to track, which was the number of loans being issued. We wanted to use this to determine the average loan amount and see how many loans are issued per month, which helps us project the cash flow of the TELP program. We created a statistical account called New Loans Issued. We began using statistical journal entries, and we created a custom purchasing view in the TELP requisition area to help track monthly loan issuance. To execute the plan, the loan administrator is the sole person responsible for this data, so they have to track and maintain our new loans on an ongoing basis. So if I go to the TELP requisition workflow, here's the custom workflow. Right now it's just showing the amount of new loans issued in the month of July. So we're currently at 97 through July 22nd. So at the end of the month, when July is over, you can come to this view, see what the total is, and update our records for new loans issued. And to help monitor the plan, we deployed a dashboard. And before we get into what the TELP loan dashboard looks like, in addition to using statistical accounts, they use a dimension called customer. So for our customers, so they issue a loan to an employee, they use the vendor ID like we all use for requests, but to track the balances, they actually use a customer ID. So here's an example of one of the customers we use in Intacct. This allows us to use the name, some personal information, their employee ID in Workforce Go, tribal program they're employed at. We have a tab here that lets us identify the type of customer they are. So for TELP, if you were issued a loan while working through the BIA, then we would use TELP BIA, IHS, OHDC, the casino, dormitory, St. Francis, SGU, SWA, TLE, all these different organizations that we loan to. And so by identifying a person as being from one of these, this allows us then to create reports and see, well, how much money does an average employee from one of these organizations owe the tribe through the TELP loan program? So not only is just the customer number reportable on, anything that we put into the customer becomes something we can enhance our reports for. So if we go to a dimension report for the month of July, we wanted to know more information about our TELP program. And instead of getting a report that's going to be by customer, so customer ID, we can identify a certain person here. But a field most of us probably don't use or look at is we have something called customer type. So now I can say, well, I want all the customers or only the customers that we've identified as being associated to St. Francis. We're going to show it by customer ID. And now when we view this report, we only have the people who we flagged for St. Francis Indian School. We don't have tribal employees in this, or OHDC, or casino, or any of that. Now we have just a report on how much an individual from that place owes us, and then the balance of that organization's total receivables for the TELP program. And it just took us mere seconds to do it. If we were keeping this on an Excel spreadsheet and we're asked to do this, are we prepared to answer a question as fast as you could doing something like this? But in Intacct, for the TELP program, we created a dashboard to say, let's take advantage of the dimensions we're using, the statistical accounts we use. And so the first report that pops up for us is that monthly loan count. So for example, here, June of 2020, we issued 125 new TELP loans. June of 2021, it was 180. In May, it was, in 2020 of May, it was 60, and then this year, 157. April of 2020, it was 61. This year, it's 134. July of last year was 134. So based on the 3 previous months, we can project that July might grow to be a larger loan period than it was last year. So we might be issuing more loans than 134 we did last year. We looked at that purchasing view where we're at 97 through now. We still have 9 days to go. So we might end up hitting that and keeping that trend continuing. So we can see our monthly loan activity by doing this. We have a small little loan stats report that tells us for the life of the loan program, how much money have we sent out versus how much money has come in, and the total amount of loans throughout the life of the program. Allows us to get ratios, so we know that since we've started running TELP, $1 goes out for every dollar that comes in, and that the average person borrows $1,900. So besides the life of the TELP loan, we also have last fiscal year and this fiscal year. So this fiscal year, last fiscal year, FY20, the ratio looks a little bit better. We've sent out 3.4 million for every 4 million that come in. In other words, 87 cents went out for every dollar that come in. The average person, though, is now borrowing $2,000 through FY20. And then in 21, We're just about dead even at a 1-to-1 ratio, and the average person is now borrowing $2,300. So we can use this information to project out. If the average person is borrowing $2,300, and we anticipate 180 loans for the month of July, we would know to anticipate potentially loaning out $418,000 in July. So we would know that whatever cash flow we're maintaining, we better have enough on hand to accommodate those requests. So those are all the things we've built based on just that one statistical account, just the number of loans issued. Using the dimensions and that type of TELP tribe, TELP St. Francis, we can expand to now see, we know the program's owed this amount of money. This is how much is owed from tribal employees, college, and so on and so forth. And all it takes is for the loan administrator to come to this one page and can already be dialed into how the program's running by just going to one screen and not having to calculate this through an Excel spreadsheet or another way. So the key to all this is, if this is something we wanted to do or something we're thinking about, is what data is it we're trying to report about? What do we need to be more visible, and how can we use it to be better, or use it to make better decisions, to provide information to our committees or whomever the audience is. We can use this data to calculate with our financial data. So it's just whatever we can come up with as a program, and then we can work together through finance to develop the way for you to do this. All right, I don't see any questions that have come into the chat box. This is all the material I wanted to go over today. So thank you everybody for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.